All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. All right, let's do a little 49er update. A number of interesting headlines surrounding the 49ers today, and let's talk about all of them. Let's start with the first one. The 49ers are hiring ex-Seahawks linebacker KJ Wright as an assistant linebacker coach, as the assistant linebacker coach, defensive quality control coach. And KJ Wright, obviously a really good linebacker at Mississippi State, played a full career in the NFL with the Seahawks, wants to get involved in coaching, and this is the first step. He's 34. He's an ex-player. Assistant linebacker coach, defensive quality control is kind of like bottom of the heap. And that's where you start, you start there. So I think it'll be advantageous for the 49ers to have a guy of Wright's pedigree as a player on their coaching staff. He clearly is a fan of Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner and the style that they play. He was a great run and hit linebacker, and he wants to be a coach. And obviously there has to be some trust there to bring a guy like that in, because he was a longtime Seahawk. And obviously he's fostered a trust with Kyle Shanahan. And so Shanahan has added KJ Wright to his staff. And I think overall that's probably a pretty good hire. A couple other notes that are interesting. Dan Graziano with a report out of the combine. And this is more of a rumor coming out of Indianapolis, but Dan Graziano from ESPN reports the 49ers have at least some interest in re-signing Chase Young, who's only 24 and he's a free agent. And Graziano says that Young may have to take, kind of a 1 year prove it type of deal and come back and see what he can show as a player and then retest the market a year from now. Nick Bosa is a big fan of his. The only edge rushers the Niners have under contract right now are Nick Bosa, Drake Jackson, and Robert Beal Jr. So re-signing somebody between Cleveland Farrell, Chase Young, Randy Gregory was probably going to be essential just for continuity purposes, unless you're going to draft a bunch of rookie defensive linemen and have them all make your team. So Chase Young, who, was kind of dogging it in the NFC Championship game, but then came back in the Super Bowl and really played his butt off, is back. And maybe, the being exposed there and as a guy not going hard, maybe kind of challenges him and makes him play at the Niners speed going forward. It was interesting to watch, him play that speed in the NFC Championship game and then play with his hair on fire in the Super Bowl and tell George Kittle, hey, I will not let you down. So Chase Young in his offseason is going to be really interesting to follow. And if the Niners could get him on a 1 year prove it type deal, I think that would be good. The only edge rushers they have on the roster are Bosa, Drake Jackson, and Robert Beal. So the Niners did meet with edge rushers in the offseason leading into the draft process. Of the guys that they met with, Darius Robinson from Missouri could be there late round one. Austin Booker from KU, 6'6" defensive end, edge rusher, probably a round two guy. Javon Solomon from Troy was incredibly productive at Troy. I mean, the guy had unbelievable sack production. He didn't run all that great, though. I think he ran in the high 4.6s or mid 4.6s at the combine. Gabe Murphy from UCLA, Braden McGregor from Michigan, Jonah Ellis from Utah is probably going to be a second-round pick. Super productive defensive end coming out of Utah. Luther Ellis's son, but a hell of a player. I mean, Jonah Ellis is really, really good. He's closer to 250. And then Regan Upshaw's kid, Taylor Upshaw, who played for a couple different schools, finished up at University of Arizona. All those guys the Niners have met with, and they're all edge rushers, defensive ends, guys who could play defensive end in their wide 9-4-3 alignment. So, but that's going to be an interesting one. Will the Niners re-sign Chase Young, and will they get him at a bargain price? A couple other things of interest. Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic is reporting that the 49ers did explore the possibility of hiring Jeff Ulbrich as their defensive coordinator. That eventually, of course, that job eventually went to Nick Sorensen. Brandon Staley was brought in as the assistant head coach. But I guess according to the report, Ulbrich and the Niners did have a mutual interest in seeing Jeff be the defensive coordinator for the Niners, but Robert Saleh nixed it. And he had the ability to, because the Niners weren't changing the title. It was going to be, he was going to go from the Jets defensive coordinator to the Niners defensive coordinator. And you don't have to allow coaches to make a lateral move, especially late in the process. And Saleh nixed it. So Ulbrich has been a coach in the NFL since 2010. He's been the Jets defensive coordinator since 2021. All right, this video is also brought to you by Aura. Let's hear from Aura right now. A word from our sponsor, Aura. Have you ever typed your name on the internet and seen all of your private information is online? Are you tired of receiving tons of spam calls from random numbers? Are you receiving more and more of these as time has gone on? Well, that's where Aura, the sponsor of today's show, can really help you out. Data brokers sell your information to scammers and spammers and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, your email, your home address, all your records, your health records, who your relatives are. It's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it also protects me from hackers who could use the information to help them access my social media accounts, my bank accounts, or any other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats I can't see. I get other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download several different apps. It's really easy to set up. And best of all, I get everything at one affordable price. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to the link in the description to start your 2-week free trial. And thanks to Aura for being a sponsor of the Krug Show as we continue with this video, a little 49er update on Monday, March the 4th / Tuesday, March the 5th, some of the news and notes surrounding the 49ers. Now, Dan Graziano also had this one, and this is an interesting one. He says the 49ers are an intriguing option for Jets failed number 2 overall quarterback, Zach Wilson, who has been given permission by the Jets to seek a trade. Most likely the team that picks him up is going to be responsible for $5.4 million on the salary for Wilson for 2024. And then he becomes a full free agent at the end of the year. And according to Graziano, Wilson is looking for a skilled offensive head coach because he's looking to revive his career. Now, would coming to the 49ers revive his career? I don't know. I don't know that it would. Brock Purdy's pretty durable. What if Brock Purdy stays healthy all year? You could sit the bench all year in San Francisco. But then, you know, the Niners had Sam Darnold, and Darnold is a free agent. They have Brandon Allen. He's a free agent. Theoretically, one of those two guys could get a job somewhere else in this offseason. And maybe Zach Wilson is of interest. I would imagine at $5.4 million, it would be more. He would be more of interest to the Niners if Sam Darnold, who was making in the similar neighborhood financially, contractually wise. You know, if Darnold left in free agency and you wanted to have Brandon Allen back as that third quarterback, Brock's your 1, and Zach Wilson becomes your 2. I think that's interesting. I know a lot of people look at Zach Wilson and just go, oh, he sucks. He's terrible. He's a bust. He'll never be good. But you got to remember there's an awful lot of NFL Hall of Fame quarterbacks who didn't do anything until they were 27, 28, 29, 30, 31 in the case of Steve Young. There's a lot of young quarterbacks who come into the league with lots of fanfare and it doesn't work out. And then they kind of figure it out. Vinny Testaverde was a player like that. Came into the league with Tampa. Tampa was bad. Eventually he figured it out and had some very good years with the Ravens and the Jets. So just because, you know, Justin Fields and Zach Wilson and Mac Jones and some of these guys have come in, Trey Lance have come into the NFL and have not lit it ablaze, doesn't mean that they're just totally awful quarterbacks and it will be that way forever. The one thing about Zach Wilson is he played at BYU. He rarely had any experience playing in a muddy pocket with bodies flying around him. And it takes some getting used to. Now you step into the NFL, you never have a down where you're not operating from a muddy pocket. And, then you mix in the fact that the Jets were a bad team. He played behind a bad line for a defensive head coach. And who knows? Maybe Zach Wilson, I would guess that Zach Wilson badly wants to play for Kyle Shanahan. The question is, how much does Kyle Shanahan like Zach Wilson? And does he view Wilson as a good fit with Brock Purdy? To me, it's more about the personality blend than the skill or the contract. I think they can make the contract work. And skill-wise, he's plenty skilled. He's got good throwing mechanics. He's got good velocity on the ball. He's got mobility. It hasn't worked out to this point, but Zach Wilson can play football. The question is personality-wise. The whole team wore the backup jersey, the T-shirt announcing, Mike White or celebrating Mike White, who is the backup to Zach Wilson. Wilson didn't necessarily take accountability for the struggles that he had when he was with the Jets. And you just kind of wonder how that move would be received by Brock, by Brandon Allen, if he was the guy remaining, by Sam Darnold, if he was the guy remaining, by the other guys in the locker room. And it's a factor. I don't know how big of a factor, but it's a factor. So, interesting note. I would endorse Zach Wilson as a backup for the Niners. Why? Because I like Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson's got a lot of potential. And I think before it's all said and done, he will play he'll play at a much higher level than he's played to thus far. And a lot of the Niner questions are at this point, would you rather go get a free agent? Would you rather go into the draft? The Niners will have 11 draft picks. They this year will pick 31, 63, 94, 99, 125, 132, 176, 214, 216, 234, 253. We'll see if that changes at all before draft day, but I believe that's where they have 11 draft picks, 4 compensatory picks, and that's where I would expect they will pick. A couple other notes related to the Niners. Rich Eisen, with one of the rumors coming out of Indy, says that Trey Lance may be the Vikings' next quarterback. He's had 4 starts in the NFL. He's 2-2. The Niners traded him to Dallas for a 4th-round pick. Is Dallas going to turn around and trade him to the Minnesota Vikings? And then the interesting thing there will be, well, if they do trade him to the Vikings, do they get more than the 4th-round pick that they invested in Lance, they gave to the Niners to get Lance? Or is the price tag going from Dallas to Minnesota less? Is it like a 5th-round pick? That's going to be interesting. Minnesota, I'm sure it will be a very popular move to bring a kid who's from Marshall, Minnesota, in-house to be the Vikings' future quarterback. But they obviously couldn't satisfy the Niners in a trade last summer. I don't know if it's about the price tag or what the Niners were asking. But Trey Lance to Minnesota seems like a fait accompli at some point. Now, the question is, what's Dallas going to get in return? And a couple other notes. This one's really interesting to me. According to 49ers Sports Talk on Twitter, it's a source, there's expected to be mutual interest between the 49ers and free agent corner Emmanuel Moseley during free agency. Moseley was an original Niner. He suffered a torn ACL in now back-to-back seasons. He's only 27, though, and he definitely would be a low-cost signing. The Lions do have interest in bringing him back, according to a source. I would love to see Emmanuel Moseley back with the 49ers, despite the injuries he's had. Why? Just simply because he's really good at setting the edge in the run game, and the price is probably going to be not prohibitively high. And this guy plays for keeps. He knows the Niners culture. A lot of introducing veterans to the room, it's like, do they fit your culture? And it's actually kind of a big deal. And we know that Emmanuel Moseley fits their defense, fits their culture. He's a great edge setter against the run. That's a really interesting one. is Emmanuel Moseley in free agency. So that's something to watch for. And one last note, and this is an interesting one as well. The 49ers seem to understand how they want to go about free agency. They have about 20 free agents. My guess is they're going to let over 15 of those free agents walk away. Their habit has not been in recent years to re-sign a lot of their defensive free agents or a lot of their free agents, period. They let them go. Then they usually sign one big name free agent every year and bring that guy in to try to make their football team quite a bit better. And then they fill in with day 3 draft choices and undrafted free agents. So if that is their formula, and I believe they believe it is, and it's a successful formula, that means that if you look at the 49ers depth chart, most of these free agents are leaving. And I'll list them for you. Chris Conley, Ray McLeod, Ben Barch, John Feliciano could be back, it sounds like, according to John Lynch. Matt Pryor, Charlie Warner, Ross Dwelly, Brandon Allen, Sam Darnold. Jawan Jennings is restricted. We'll see what kind of offer he gets this offseason. But of those free agents, of all those offensive free agents, I don't think, Jawan's restricted, so technically he can't go. And Feliciano, Lynch has said, is a guy they'd like to have back. But everybody else, I could see Conley and Barch maybe coming back for really cheap. Everybody else, I think, could move on. Maybe Charlie Warner comes back. Maybe Brandon Allen comes back. And then if you flip the card to the defensive side, Randy Gregory, Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, Cleveland Farrell, Chase Young, Sebastian Joseph Day, Oren Burks, Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, Tayshaun Gibson, Logan Ryan. They're all free agents. And maybe Chase Young comes back at a bargain rate. But Farrell, Givens, Kinlaw, Gregory, Day, Burks, Flanagan Fowles, Gibson, Logan Ryan, those guys could all walk. And I think it's maybe even likely that most of them do. If you said to me, who do you really think's coming back? I would say Feliciano's coming back. And maybe Ben Barch and Chris Conley on real cheap deals. I think everybody else on off, maybe Brandon Allen comes back. On defense, it sounds like possibly Chase Young will return on a 1-year prove-it deal. The rest of those defensive players, I think, all walk away in free agency. So, of the 20 free agents the 49ers have, I would say it's a lock that 15 of them are walking away. So that's part of their equation. They let a lot of their guys walk away. And I think they'll do it again. The other part of their equation is they go sign a top-tier guy, but just one. 2 years ago, it was Mooney Ward. Last year, it was Javon Hargrave. Is there going to be a grade A free agent that they go sign this year? And if there is, who's it going to be? And we kind of speculated about this over the last few days. Well, Bleacher Report has named the 49ers as a fit for Bears cornerback Jalen Johnson, who's probably going to get $17, $18 million a year. The quote was, the 49ers just took the Chiefs to overtime in the Super Bowl, and while the 49ers do have reliable cornerback depth, they ranked 5th in net yards per pass attempt allowed last season. They have been in the market for a top-tier corner. Johnson is projected to get roughly $16 million a year per spot track. I think it may be even a little bit more than that. Jalen Johnson, that is an interesting name for the 49ers as far as free agency is concerned. There was a lot of speculation, maybe L'Jarius Sneed, but in some ways, Jalen Johnson makes more sense. Why? He's younger. He's a relatively young free agent number 1 corner who plays with a ton of tenacity. He's only 24. So he was the Bears' 2nd round pick in the 2022 draft, I believe. No, he was the 2nd round pick in the 20 draft. So he's played in the league for a while, but he came into the league very young. So he's only 24 going on 25. And, this is a guy who played at Utah. And, if you could get Jalen Johnson as your big name free agent and, sign a guy like Moseley behind it, you could take corner completely off the board as far as draft needs. And they can focus more on defensive end, defensive tackle, wide receiver, linebacker, and of course, the offensive line. So that's an interesting one right there. How would 49er fans feel about adding Jalen Johnson? I think that would be very, very exciting. So Jalen Johnson to me would make a lot of sense. He's a tenacious, aggressive corner who's young, whose best football's ahead of him. You put Jalen Johnson opposite Mooney Ward with Demo Lenore, you really got something, man. You really got something. So maybe that's the plan. Maybe that's the plan on the back end, is a guy like Jalen Johnson. And why does the Niner, free agent philosophy work so well? It works so well for a lot of reasons. One, they get roster turnover. So that's usually a good thing. If you have some older guys, you can move them off the roster. You keep a lot of your young players because some teams sign 5, 6, 7, 8 free agents to meet middle of the road type deals. The Niners don't want to be that team. That's not how they want to build their team. They want to build their team through the draft, so they can establish their culture with their players easier than if this guy came from the Vikings, that guy came from the Bucks, this guy came from the Patriots, and everybody's used to different standards of practice, different standards of culture, different expectations of motor, and so many other things that matter as part of your defensive culture or your offensive culture as a football team. So, and then they let a bunch of guys walk. They wind up taking every year 3 or 4 picks in the compensatory formula for allowing 15 free agents to walk out the door and only signing 2 or 3. And then the biggest issue is the guys that they do sign, Mooney Ward, Javon Hargrave. They walk into the room making more money than guys on the team. But if they're better, there's no issue. The only problem is if they're not better. And that's where so many teams wind up with issues in their locker room, is they sign 5 free agents, and 3 of the free agents they signed aren't as good as their existing players. And yet they feel the need to play those free agent players over their returning players because they spent so much to acquire them in free agency. They may have overpaid. And then you've got a locker room full of guys going, hey, man, that guy's getting paid and I'm not. Niners don't have that problem because when Javon Hargrave walks in the room, the rest of the guys don't go, I'm better than him. They say, oh, that's Javon Hargrave. When Mooney Ward's making more, Demo Lenore and Ambry Thomas and all those guys back there, they're not going, oh, Mooney's making more than us. They're like, Mooney's better than us. And if the Niners brought in Jalen Johnson would be, one of their best defensive players on day one, and nobody would begrudge him a nickel that he's making in free agency. So interesting name, interesting report. Coach Yak had it on his Twitter. I think that's one of the most interesting reports of the week. Jalen Johnson, if you believe the rumors coming out of the 49er camp right after the trade deadline, the Niners and John Lynch kicked tires on a trade that would have brought Jalen Johnson from the Bears to the Niners. So they didn't get him in a trade, but they clearly like him. And now he's a 24-year-old free agent. I could see Jalen Johnson being the one free agent that the Niners signed to big money this offseason. Would not be shocked at all. All right, thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Aura for sponsoring this video. And thanks to all you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.